Okay, so on to our next speaker, which is Dr. Carol Strahan. Carol is an educational psychologist for the Education Authority in Northern Ireland. Carol is going to talk to us about how we can support our children and young people in the wake of COVID and its impact on education and society. Carol, are you there?
I am indeed, yes. Thank you, David.
I'll pass over to you.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Tonight, I'm going to look at supporting our children and young people on their COVID journey. It's something you do already as teachers, but tonight I'm going to shine a spotlight on it. I want to begin by a quotation. At their best, schools can function as islands of safety in a chaotic world. They can teach children how their bodies and brains work and how they understand and deal with emotions. Schools can play a significant role in instilling the resilience necessary to deal with the traumas of neighbourhoods or families. It's a quote that was written over 5 years ago, pre-COVID, but I think it's very relevant to the situation we find ourselves in today. And it reaffirms the important work that teachers do day in, day out to support our children and young people's mental health. So what do the statistics say? Well, a recent report from Young Minds said that 67% believed that the pandemic will have a long-term negative effect on their mental health. 79% believed that their mental health would improve once lockdown restrictions were lifted. And of the top 3 areas of concern for our young people, it was loneliness and isolation, concerns about school, college or university, and not being able to do the activities they usually do. I'm sure we can all identify with those areas ourselves. So what I'm planning to do this evening is take you through this model. I came across this model after the first lockdown. It was written in response to the first lockdown. It's a great resource. It talks about what you can do to support children and young people through critical incidents such as COVID-19. And I would really encourage you to look at it. It's got some fantastic resources, hyperlinks that work when you click on them, and you can use them in your classroom. But the 5 key principles I talk about are: put emotional well-being first for everyone, reaffirm school's strengths and core values, place relationships front and centre, reaffirm safety and routines, and acknowledge loss, change, and bereavement. So the first one, put emotional well-being first. As adults, we need to be able to regulate our emotions so we can help children and young people to regulate their emotions. It's similar to what they tell you on an aeroplane. You need to put your oxygen mask on first before you can help others. We need to get control back. That is one thing we did not have during this pandemic. And when we are losing control, we go into our fight and flight mode. We become stressed and anxious, and we can't think rationally. We need to try to get control back, whether that's control in our school or control in our classroom, so that we can then help our children and young people to get control back. It needs to be adults first and children next. I really, really want to stress the importance of teacher well-being. It should be a priority within schools when we're thinking about supporting our children and young people with their mental health. It's not something I'm going to go into a lot of detail this evening because our other speakers are focusing on it, but I'm just highlighting it again, the importance of it. Also like to bring your attention to the Education Authority's School Staff Wellbeing Project Pilot. The aim is to support schools in creating a more positive school culture, which focuses on staff wellbeing. And we're going to support schools to nominate a member of staff to become a health and wellbeing lead. And this project is due to start very soon. I'd also like to bring your attention to the Education Authority's Health Well Hub, which is an excellent resource when you're looking at anything to do with loss and bereavement or just general stress management. It's got fantastic resources. So please have a little click on it and have a look. Okay, this evening I want to kind of throw a psychological model at you, which I think is useful when you're trying to understand children's emotions. It's a Bronfenbrenner ecological theory. So as teachers in the classroom, we tend to see the behaviors. We tend to see the children who are perhaps very angry or who are very stressed or who are struggling to sustain attention. But sometimes as adults, we need to take a step back to try to understand where the child is coming from, what is contributing to that behavior. So if we look at this model in relation to COVID-19, we have the child in the center. If we think about the red circle, the immediate family, Perhaps a parent was a key worker and perhaps they were stressed and anxious, and this can impact on our children and young people. Perhaps a parent was furloughed and the child had a more positive experience, they had more time with their family. Or perhaps it was a negative experience. As we know, there was a rise of domestic violence during the pandemic. Perhaps there was a loss of a member of the family due to COVID-19. So all of those would have an impact on that child or young person. If we go out to the kind of kinship and informal network circle, then we're looking at friendships. A lot of our younger children lost that friendship opportunities. Our young people had the opportunity of technology, but the younger children really struggled to connect with others. And that's how we really learn about our emotions, through relationships, through practicing those social skills. But at the same time, we had more time with our neighbours. So perhaps children and young people felt more connected to their neighbours. If we look out to the next circle, we're looking at whenever our schools closed, the impact that had on our children and young people, the impact of even the parks closing during the first lockdown, soft play is closing, all of those social opportunities were lost again. And if we look at the wider one, that idea of how schools have changed, how social norms have changed. We wear masks now, we wash our hands. A lot of schools are still working within those bubbles. So there are a lot of changes on our children and young people. And every child is unique. Some of those changes will have had a huge impact on that child, and others will be more resilient. But it's a good model to look back on. Okay, reaffirm school's strength and core values. School culture is one of the most powerful and influential forces within any organisation. It is the unwritten or unspoken rules of the way we do things around here. We really need to have a positive school culture, a school culture that focuses on staff well-being. If we focus on nurturing staff well-being, then that will impact on children's well-being and their learning. However, if we have a negative school culture, it'll be a more toxic school environment. We're more likely to have teachers who are stressed, anxious, possibly burnt out. That again will have a negative impact on our children and young people, not only on their mental health, but also on their learning. School culture is something I'm very passionate about, and I could talk about it for hours, but we don't have the time this evening. So I want to leave you with one psychological term to think about: collective efficacy. This basically means that you as a school, that you as a group of teachers feel that you can make a positive difference to those children and young people, a positive difference to their learning, but a positive difference to their mental health as well. And it's something I've looked at over in England. They did a lot of research on how we can increase collective efficacy. Because if we increase collective efficacy, we're more likely to have a positive school culture. And the three key areas of increasing collective efficacy is clear communication between senior management and the rest of the staff. Staff need to be involved in decision making. All of that communication needs to be exceptionally clear so everyone knows what's happening within the school. We need opportunities for collaboration, sharing good practice, being able to observe others to see what way they're doing things, and a real focus on psychological well-being. Because as one of our speakers has already said this evening, what works for one person will not work for everybody. Place relationships front and center. Recovery can take place, but only within the context of relationships. Relationships between staff and staff, relationships between staff and relationships between children and children. We need to spend time nourishing these relationships and reflect on our own coping skills. When we have the right coping skills, then we can teach our children and young people how to manage and build resiliency. We need to spend time talking, connecting with our children and young people, not just about COVID-19, but in general. Children's voices need to be heard, and 5 minutes a day is a lot better than just 30 minutes a week. And remember the kind of ground rules for active listening, that idea of respect and genuineness, open body language, and not rushing to give solutions. A lot of our children and young people don't want solutions. They just want their voices to be heard. Creating a safe space where you can talk about emotions. Some of our children and young people will struggle to understand what they're feeling. So saying things like, I think you might be feeling anxious, I think you might be feeling angry or sad, and then letting that young person reflect on, okay, what does that feel like? Yes, that is what sadness feels like. Okay, that's what anger feels like. They need time to learn what emotions are. And that's really through relationships. And relationships with parents are key. If we go back to the Bromford Brenner model, They're the ones who are going to tell us what is going on in that child or young person's life. Reaffirm safety and routines. This is something schools excel at. We are great in schools at predictability, the timetables, so we know where we're going. Even the visual timetables for our young children is a great resource. Mobilize, encourage movement to redirect that extra energy we have at the moment due to stress and anxiety. Little bits of movement throughout the day. Transitional objects to help the younger children with separation anxiety. So that's something that they bring into school that reminds them of that parent, whether that's a photo book they look at when they're feeling that they're very sad and that they miss their parent, or perhaps it's some perfume or aftershave that a parent puts on the uniform and then they smell that during the day when they need to have that connection with that parent. Creating a calm box is a great idea for our children and young people, and let them decide what helps makes them calm. Is it mindfulness activities? Is it meditation? Is it music? Is it coloring in? Is it movement? Let them think about it. And as teachers, create a calm box to remind children and young people, yes, I am a teacher. I get stressed. I get anxious. And these are the things that help me feel calm. Lots of smiling, lots of non-verbal cues. Let them know you're glad to have them back. We had a lot of abrupt endings last year, so it's really important to pay attention to our hellos and goodbyes. Loss, change, and bereavement. This is something I think as a culture we tend to shy away from talking about, but children will often construct something way worse in their head. It's very important to talk about loss. Every time something in life changes, something is lost. And different people experience loss in different ways, and we cannot assume our children will grieve based on our own experiences. Keep in mind the child's age and ability when talking to them about loss, bereavement, and change. And listen to the children. Don't brush questions aside. It's okay if you don't know the answer. You can just say, I don't know, but I'll find out and I'll get back to you. Again, we're building those relationships, we're building the trust, we're building the resiliency. And the Goldilocks principle, not too much, don't tell them too much, don't tell them too little, just tell them the right amount. And if you don't feel confident talking about loss or death, go on to Winston's Wish website. It's got some excellent resources to look at. So this evening I've talked in general about supporting our children and young people, but this is a list of groups that you might need to keep a little bit of an extra eye on. You might need a little bit more support. Children of key workers, children and young people who have been bereaved, children and young people within minority communities, children in care, previously in care, children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities, children and young people at key points of transition, and children and young people with social workers, young carers, children and young people living in poverty. Thank you for listening. I hope it was useful. And if anybody wants to get in touch with me about the wellbeing project the EA is running, please just send me an email. And there's some resources that you may find useful at the end of the presentation, which I'm sure can be shared. Thank you.
Carol, that's great. Thank you very much.